We are joined now by Congresswoman Primila Jayapal to talk about some of the biggest issues this year, and among them is, of course, immigration. Thank you so much for joining us to talk about all of this.
It's so great to be with you, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Let's start off with this week. The House Speaker, Mike Johnson, continued to demand Congress pass hardline immigration policies before backing the president's emergency wartime funding request for Ukraine. At the border, we know illegal crossings have surpassed 10,000 people in several days last month. Also in Ukraine, Russia recently launched what officials call the largest barrage of missile attacks since the war began. So, Congresswoman, what can Congress do to address both these crises, and is there a compromise?
Yeah, well, this is a really important issue. It's top on our agenda. First of all, Ukraine funding should not be held hostage for anything else. And unfortunately, what the extreme MAGA Republicans have been doing in the entire year last year was holding one thing hostage to get things that they couldn't pass on their own. So, they barely passed their H.R. 2 border bill, which is ridiculous. It is not going to make our immigration system function. What we really need is comprehensive immigration reform, but we also have some bipartisan solutions that could be implemented right now if the Senate were to be able to pass them. We have passed them in the House in the past. There are also things that the administration is doing right now, things like legal pathways on the border, which helps us to make sure we process. Some of the supplemental money is to get more immigration judges, more asylum officers, people who can help process the flow more quickly. What the Republicans are doing right now on immigration and what they're proposing is not going to address the situation at the border, and also it is going to fundamentally undermine our values and our needs as a country that has always welcomed immigrants but needs a legal system that meets the needs of our century.
House Speaker Johnson, I think, just recently visited the border. He's obviously making this an issue front and center. Government funding also runs out in a couple of weeks. Do you foresee some issues with that?
Well, that was the issue. If you remember, going back to the debt ceiling, they were holding the debt ceiling hostage. They weren't willing to lift the debt ceiling unless there were fundamental funding changes. And they tried to get immigration changes in, by the way, as well. But what was finally agreed to was a set of funding levels, which they've now said we're not going to abide by. And so even on funding, we are now so late in passing these bills. We have two funding deadlines, one in January, one in February, so they kind of split the appropriations process in half. And so I think what they're saying now is that they're going to attach hardline immigration proposals to every must-pass bill. This is holding government hostage. It is not fair to the American people. It's not fair to small business owners. It's not fair to anybody because we need to get these things done.
I think there's some concern of a little bit of deja vu because Congress was especially gridlocked in 2023 last year, passing just, in our research, 20 bills in both houses, which is among the fewest in modern history. We have a new year ahead of us. What is your caucus doing to improve that track record in 2024, and where do you see opportunities for compromise?
Yeah, well, let's just remember, it's Republicans that control that Congress. The do-nothing Congress is what we call it, and it's terrible, Christine. I don't go to Washington, D.C. to sit around and do nothing, or to pass bills that have no chance of passing in the Senate or becoming law with a Democratic Senate and a Democratic president. And so I think what I'm hoping is after the 3-month debacle of them having to go through trying to get a new speaker, they finally have a new speaker. But the question is, does he understand he functions in divided government? Does he understand that we have a Democratic president and a Democratic Senate, and there are fundamental things that are necessary for government to function? Government funding, the debt ceiling was a part of this. All of these pieces have never been held hostage in the way that these extreme MAGA Republicans are doing so that they can undermine our fundamental rights and our values as a country.
Let's turn to another topic here. You work with fellow Democrats on the Senate Finance Committee on an inquiry into how pharmacy chains can apparently use and share sensitive personal information on prescription records. What is the concern here?
Well, this was really important after the Supreme Court overturned the longtime precedent of Roe v. Wade, took away abortion rights for people across this country. Senator Ron Wyden and I launched an inquiry into whether pharmacies were actually sharing personal information about their clients without a warrant. And what we found is that every major chain was doing that unless it was prohibited by state law that required warrants to be obtained. Yeah. This is very scary. This is the most personal information that people have about their health. And so what we're now doing is we want to have federal requirements around this. But by the way, Washington State is one of the states that doesn't have a warrant requirement. That could be put into place here in Washington State as well.
So would you be advocating for that as a change, for that to be placed in Washington?
I think we should do it at the state level, and we also need to do it at the federal level. That is obviously the best thing is at the federal level, but states can do it right now, and certainly a state like Washington where we have control, I think it's a very good idea, and I'm happy to work with any state lawmakers who, are interested in this idea.
I gotcha. Congresswoman, last few weeks we had some very positive news from the FBI, data showing that homicide rates have actually been going down and overall violent crime has been going down as well. However, in the city of Seattle, homicide rates have reached a record just last year. What do we need to do to address this from your perspective?
Well, from my perspective, guns are a major part of this. And look, we have put in place some gun laws here to protect people in our state, but it doesn't matter if people can bring guns across state lines. So we really need a federal solution to gun violence. We need to ban assault weapons. We need to make sure we're addressing bump stocks, which allow somebody to have a gun and kill numerous people if they're there. The easy access of guns, I think, is an enormous problem. Tied to that, we need to make sure we're addressing all of the social services that help people to lead happy and healthy lives, where they're not just trying to survive, but they're actually thriving. I was at a food bank yesterday, West Seattle Food Bank, and just hearing about, and I had visits to food banks right before the Christmas break, we are at an all-time high on numbers of people who are hungry. In the richest country in the world, we should not have this level of hunger, and it is a problem that is solvable. It is a policy problem, not a personal failure. And we need to address some of those core issues in order for people to feel like they have other options than turning to violence.
Certainly. Let's turn to the conflict in the Middle East, one of the biggest topics, to be sure, this coming year. You have long called for a ceasefire in Gaza, and as the situation in the Middle East, however, grows increasingly volatile in the past few weeks and arguably in the past couple of months, has your position changed at all?
My position has not changed, and in fact, it's become stronger. We are now seeing the conflict expand to other countries. I'm worried about what this means for peace more broadly in the Middle East. The United States continues to be isolated as one of the only countries that is blocking a ceasefire call in the UN. And the reality is that we just had two Israeli cabinet ministers make horrific statements about, mass exodus of Palestinians. Netanyahu has specifically said he doesn't want to or believe that a two-state solution is possible. These are values and policies, positions that are completely diametrically opposite to what the United States has said. And so I think that we need to have an immediate ceasefire. We need to get humanitarian aid in. We need to get the hostages out. We have 300 American citizens that are still there. And Christine, over 22,000 Palestinians have been killed. Right. And I just met with one of my constituents, Ramona, who was stuck in Gaza. She's a prosthetics doctor. Right. She was there serving kids. We were able to get her out. And, all she wanted to talk about is what's happening to the children, what's happening to Palestinian children and adults, women, fathers, mothers, who are part of collective punishment. That is against international humanitarian law. And so it is really critical that the United States immediately calls for a ceasefire. I am going to continue to do that. Sure. And I'm going to make sure also, this is a very painful issue. It's a very painful conflict for so many people. And here at home, we need to make sure that we stop the hate. We make sure that we stop hate crimes against Jewish and Muslim and Palestinian Arab communities, and that we understand that the only way to get to peace is not through a military solution. It is through diplomacy.
Well, going in a little bit more into that, Israel and Netanyahu, they have been very staunch in saying they're going to be wiping out Hamas. If there is an extended ceasefire, how can they continue to do that? What are some of the solutions beyond that?
I've spent a lot of time on this and actually talked to a lot of experts on terrorism. The way Hamas absolutely needs to go, but the way to do that is is not by making sure that we get generations more of people who hold resentments and are easily recruited into Hamas, which is what is going to happen if we continue to kill Palestinians the way we've been doing. And
particularly children.
Exactly,
yeah,
particularly children. I mean, what hope do Palestinians have? You know, even in the last several months of the conflict, they were told to go to one place. They were bombed in that place. Refugee camps have been bombed. Hospitals have been bombed. And we have not, I as a member of Congress, have not seen any classified information that tells me that those hospitals were being used as command centers. I've read the New York Times report that says that that wasn't the case. They have not found that information. So there needs to be real transparency about what's happening. We can't just take the Israeli government's points.
What about some of the reports saying that they did find some tunnels underneath some of the hospitals?
Oh, of course, there have been tunnels. We've known about the tunnels.
Yeah.
In fact, Israel has helped construct some of those tunnels over time. And so we've known about the tunnels for a long time. That's never been an issue. The question is there what international humanitarian law says is if it is being used to launch an attack, that is when there is an exception within humanitarian law for attacking a hospital. It is not, there is no evidence that I have seen yet. And, you know, I'm speaking to the State Department actually later today, top officials there, about the war in the Middle East, and I'll continue to do that, to get the information to say, share it. Because right now, what is happening is consistently against humanitarian law, international humanitarian law. And I think the laws of war are what President Biden rightly called for Israel to follow at the very beginning of the conflict. Israel has not been following the laws of war, in my view, and in most of the rest of the world's view. And it is not helping to solve the solution and make sure that both Israelis and Palestinians have security, self-determination, and can live side by side.
Okay, let's take it back here in the U.S. We have the Iowa caucuses on the way. Just over a week away, President Biden's approval rating hit the lowest point of his presidency in November. We are still, of course, 11 months away from the general election. But today, do you think the situation is dire for Democrats, and what can they do to really rally some support for Joe Biden?
Well, I think we have to make sure that people really understand what we have done and what we intend to do. We had the most productive 2 years under the first 2 years of the Biden administration when we had control of the House and the Senate. We got the Inflation Reduction Act down. We've created more jobs than any other administration in history. We've been able to tackle climate. We've been able to tackle infrastructure. But people are still hurting, as I said, about the food banks. You know, people need to be able to live. And so we have a whole set of things, from making sure we have universal child care, making sure that we invest the biggest ever investment in housing. These are the things that people want to hear about that will motivate them to come to the polls. And I think we need to continue to make sure people know what we've done and to put forward what I call a proposition agenda, not just an opposition agenda. Yeah. We're better than the other guy, which we are, and not just talking about the trials and tribulations of a potential Trump administration, which I think we also have to do. But what are we working for?
So going back to the polls, of course, what can our elected officials do to protect integrity and trust in the election process as we head into November? This was certainly a big issue in the last election.
Yes.
What are some of the things in the works for now?
Well, and we're coming up on January 6th.
Yes.
And
yes.
so this is really front and center for me. And I'll tell you that the biggest thing that, frankly, that we need to do is get rid of the filibuster so we can pass voting rights reforms. What's happening right now is that many of the reforms we saw that we needed after insurrectionists stormed the Capitol on January 6th, 2021, we have now been blocked from moving forward because of Republicans in the House and the Senate. Look at the fact that all the major leaders, Republican leaders, are endorsing the former president, who has been indicted on 91 felony counts. And so I think we really need to make sure we strengthen our voting processes. Of course, our state has good processes. I think there are many states across the country that need to make sure that that's strengthened, and we need to protect the ability to count our votes properly and to have the results of an election count.
You know, time goes by so quickly. Tomorrow marks 3 years since January 6th. You, of course, were there, as we all recall. What emotions are going through you right now as we as we mark 3 years. It's kind of hard to believe.
It is hard to believe, and I'll tell you, it's just as traumatic today as it was 3 years ago. I've had a lot of time to process this, but the idea that I am the elected representative for the 7th Congressional District, and I go to Congress to represent the voices and the votes of people in my district, and that I was trapped in a gallery with a cane and a gas mask to try to fight off insurrectionists if they broke in, and that we saw the storming of the Capitol, the incitement by the former president, and almost the collapse of our democracy is a terrifying thing. And so what I want people to know is our democracy is fragile. We have to work every day to protect it, to engage in it, to vote, to make sure that our voices count and are heard, and that January 6th, ultimately, we prevailed. Our democracy prevailed. And I'm so proud of the role that I played in making that happen. And so that is the mutual feeling that exists with the trauma of that day, and knowing that I might not emerge alive from that gallery.
Certainly, we will all be reflecting, that is for sure, tomorrow. Congresswoman, thank you so much for all of your insight on this. One last message, or one last question. Any message for Huskies fans on Monday for the national championship game?
I know, it was
Any
so
message?
exciting. All I can say is we are so proud of you, Huskies. We are cheering you on with every fiber of our bodies, and we can't wait to see you win and take that tremendous skill into the game.
Thank you, Congresswoman. We appreciate it. Thank you.